All right. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Vernice Richards, and I'm the facilitator for the Sports and Exercise Psychology course of the Open Campus. I wanted to pop on here and do a quick recap of this semester's course in preparation for the wrap up of this semester. I know that we haven't seen each other face to face for quite a while, so also another reason why I wanted us to be able to put another face to this name. So I am a sport and performance psychology consultant, essentially a human performance specialist because I'm trained in sport and exercise psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy, yoga therapy, clinical and counseling psychology as well. So we sort of wrap all those things together for the purposes of this course, for the purposes of my profession. If you have any questions about this course, about some of the things that we talked about in the course, or even getting started within applied sports psychology, please don't hesitate to leave a comment, shoot me a message, an email, anything like that, and then you can so I can try to help answer and help guide you. I know a lot of people in the course were coaches, previous athletes, or just really interested in sports. So if you do have that kind of interest, feel free to also sort of check in with me, and I can try to help guide you as to resources that are available to you as a coach, various trainings that are also available, and how you can support your athletes or your clients during this time and beyond. Okay. So what we're going to do here today is going to take a few minutes to recap the course, right? So we're going to move through all of the units, all 9 units, and we're going to just do a quick recap of them. I'm not going to go into complete detail because I do ask that you check in with the unit documents that have been made available to you through the learning exchange. That is going to be really, really instrumental in your ability to be successful at the end of this course, right? So far, we've done quite a few assignments and quite a few assessments, and this course is actually wrapped up not with a final exam, but with a final assessment. So it's 100% coursework for this course, and the course document for the final assessment will be made available to you in a few days after this recording. So I know quite a few people have asked me, hey, what are we doing? How are we getting assessed? What does the end of this semester of course look like? So this is what we're here to discuss. So first off, we started off the semester with Unit 1 that spoke to Introduction to Sport and Exercise Psychology. Here we try to make you aware of what sports psychology is and the different ways that you can become certified, the different ways it's used around the world. So essentially defining and distinguishing between sports and exercise psychology. So exercise psychology has a little bit more of a physiological base. It looks at more of the body, whereas sports psychology looks at performance and the mind. That's essentially, in a nutshell, what it looks for. Bridging science and practice, applied sports psychology has a practitioner model or a science model. And we want to try to use research to inform the applied practice. If you have an applied consultant working with athletes, you want to make sure that the strategies, tips, tools, and different things that they use with the athletes that they're working with, make sure they have a science background or a research background, or basis, I suppose is the better word. And then finally, around the world, there's several different ways that people can get involved in sport and exercise psychology. Through the American system, it's the applied AASP, so the Applied Association of Sports Psychology, and the certification is a CMPC, Certified Mental Performance Coach. In the Britain or in the UK, it's the BASIS, right? British Association of Sport and Exercise Sciences. So every area has various different certifications, and if you are looking for a sport an exercise psychology consultant, you really want to look for various certifications. You want to look for experience within the sport. You want to look at certifications within and outside of sports psychology. But for a lot of people, we do sports psychology, but then we also have a background in clinical and counseling psychology, so that it sort of uses the whole aspect, right? So it's very holistic. Okay. Moving into Unit 2, we looked at personality and sport. Now, try to define what personality is. Is it something that's set? Is it something that evolves over time? Understanding personality structures, and then using psychological measures. The measures are the ones that really, so it's the one that's important for personality because we took a dive into various online personality tests and what that looks like. And we found that quite a few of them are accurate, right, for our work. So, or for our particular, yes. Um, so you can tell that you can use personality measures to help you understand where a person is at, but recognize though that when you use those things, that it assesses the person in that moment and not necessarily the whole broad scope of them. Because you can have a personality trait or type in one situation, but a different personality trait or type in a different situation. And that's why we have athletes that behave one way on the court or on the field of play and a different kind of way in the classroom or off the field of play. This is something to really be cognizant of when you're working with athletes. Uh, yeah. Okay. So going into unit 3, we talked about motivation and sport and exercise. This is a topic, together with confidence, comes up the most when working with athletes in the applied setting. Confidence and motivation. So what is motivation? Something that you can define within a situation or based on their personality, right? Because you can be motivated internally, externally, and it exists on a continuum. So you can be externally motivated and that be helpful and useful to you, or you can be internally motivated and that be helpful and useful and constructive to you. But most of us exist within a continuum. So you can be externally motivated to an extent, but internally motivated also to an extent. So we all have our various different ways of looking at it, right? Various approaches to motivation. There's the, of course, motivation approach, trait-centered, and various other constructs that you can put in place as far as the motivation goes. But then what we want to, or an element of motivation is achievement and competitiveness, right? Those are the two sort of pillars of motivation. So whether it is you're trying to achieve or whether you're just trying to get better. So competitiveness is defined differently within the veil of motivation. So that's another thing that's very individual. One thing that you would notice with a lot of the content that we covered in this course is that it's very individualized. So yes, the theories, the constructs are set, and you can read about them, you can Google them, you can do research papers on them. But once you put it in practice, which is what my forte is, when you put it into practice, it's very important to take that gray stand and make sure that you're looking at the athlete or person that comes to you. And I hope that that's something that you really got from the assessments and assignments that we have done so far in this course. That it's a lot about how are you using the context, the theory, how are you using it in either your personal experiences or the experiences that you are asked to use the content in. Okay? So really don't hold you to a hard nose knowing what the scientific theory is, but practicing it is what's most important. Okay? In Unit 4, we looked at arousal, strength, and anxiety in sport. So trying to make sure we have a definition, working definition of arousal anxiety and how you can measure it. If you are interested in quick tools or assessments or rubrics that you can use to measure arousal and anxiety, shoot me a comment or message, and I can try to send you a couple of various options that you can use that are scientifically based, but neat and short that you can use in your day-to-day. If you need questions reading them and things like that, then you can also check in with me about those, right? Stress, arousal, and anxiety does affect performance, right? So there's a huge link between that. There's something called the flow state, right? And there's something also called IZOF, which is the international zone of functioning, or the kind of zone of functioning. If you said IZOF, is what it is you want to remember. And it is essentially talking about how much stress that an individual can hold or be exposed to while they are performing and performing at their best. So it sort of loops into a bell curve. So you have people that perform really, really well under a specific amount of stress for the competition level, right? Stress and anxiety level. And then there's other people that can deal with a bit more, and there's people can deal with a little bit less. So when working with stress and anxiety and arousal, you want to make sure that the amount of stress is pertinent and effective to the performance. Because if you get outside of that range, right, that window of resilience, then that makes it a little bit difficult. in order to work really well with extreme arousal, extreme stress, and extreme anxiety, you want to work on resilience, which is the ability to deal with obstacles, the ability to have shifting or adaptable perspectives. Okay. All right. So moving into Unit 5. Unit 5 is competition and cooperation. This is one of the newer elements added to the sport and exercise realm. Newer meaning like 10 years or so. So with this one, you look at competition being between people and look at competition, cooperation being among people. So a lot of the research within these two disciplines come within this separation between elite sports and youth sports. So we want to encourage an element of competition and cooperation at both levels. Many times we tend to focus in a little bit heavier on cooperation at the youth level and then competition at the older level. And that can make things a little bit different or difficult. But it does play a huge role in how well and young athletes adapt to competition if they were bred in a cooperative model. And the same thing is that an elite group can compete better if they understand the rules and regulations and associations that come with being cooperative, right? So having that shared mental model. Okay, so unit 6, we have group and team processes and dynamics. This is one of the older sections that comes with sport and exercise psychology. So we have the stages of change, we have the stages of group think, as it were. And that's something that I'm sure you would have heard of before, but maximizing individual performance in team sports. So having a team, but working as individuals can make things a little bit different. And I mentioned the shared mental model before, and this is where this really does play a role, where it's the individual athletes working together as a team. Okay? Unit 7, exercise and exercise behavior. So this is all about paying attention to how people use exercise and what is important to them as far as well-being, quality of life, and adherence to exercise. We talk a lot about carnival culture and working out, running around the savannah, and things like that. So we have, a very unique exercise culture in the Caribbean, usually surrounding carnival, and it's something that we really do want to try to lean a little bit further towards well-being and quality of life, especially given the situations that we're in currently in the world. Right, so using exercise to enhance psychological well-being, the hormones and things like that it produces to help you have overall feelings of happiness and well-being. Unit 8, burnout, overtraining, and injuries. I felt like this is one that everybody sort of resonated with quite a bit. So burnout, especially right now, it's not only within sports, but there is Zoom fatigue. And there's a lot of things that are going on, so you have a lot of mental exhaustion. I really wish we would have had a lot more time to spend specifically on burnout and mental exhaustion compared to physical exhaustion. But we can definitely talk about that at some point. But overtraining and injury. So injury has its own section within sport and exercise psychology because there's a mindset that comes associated with an athlete or an individual that suffered or is suffering from an injury. And that goes to how they return to sport and their mentality when it comes to returning to competition as well. So that's a huge section of sports psychology. As far as overtraining goes, then that falls a little bit within the addictive realm. So it's a little more of a psychological perspective of continuously training and doing more than your body should be doing at a period of time. So making it very difficult for you to peak and for you to perform at a high level because you're training too much. So it's just something to consider going into it, right? So usually at the end of a burnout, overtraining, or injury section, the extreme section, we would have a career transition. And this is where the vision or value of self comes into play. Whereas you no longer define yourself as an athlete, but you have to define yourself as someone else or something else. And that's where a lot of the psychological perspective of motivation and personality that we talked about earlier in the course come into play. So you would notice that a lot of the challenges that we talk about within this course, within the eight units of this course and the 9 units of issues, the 8 units of this course really are intertwined. So there's no one unit that can exist on its own. But within each unit, there are elements that are very important to that specific topic, right? So the last unit that we talked about here was issues in sport and exercise psychology. So we did our presentations on this topic. So we did diversity, we did addictive behaviors, and we did aggressive behaviors or aggression in sport. And we did those three for our presentation. But I specifically left this unit for last after you did your presentation because I didn't want the context or how I define diversity, addictive behaviors, and aggression to really play a role in how you sort of defined it for yourself for the presentation. So I'm very interested to see how you guys did do that. So for this diversity in sport, it is, I mean, I think each of these topics can span its own hour-long conversation. So for the purposes of this, it's just like some really basic definitions. Right? So for diversity in sport, we're looking at gender, we're looking at age, we're looking at type of sport, competitive levels in sport, we're looking at ability in sport, as in and for disabled individuals as well. So any kind of underrepresented group or differently represented group within sport fall under diversity, right? Addictive behaviors in sport that can be from drugs, alcohol, and exercise behavior. Because you can have an addictive personality, and that means that you get addicted to various things, meaning that you just need to do it over and over again, right? So we have addictive behaviors in sport and span that gambit. And then we have aggression in sport, and that's not only aggressive behaviors, but also aggression in general. So some sports lean itself a little bit more to the ability to have aggressive behaviors in sport in that sport. But then there's also where it's like there's like hockey, for instance, has a lot of aggression in sport. But equestrian, there's no aggression in the sport. So at least they try to avoid it. So with aggression, it's like how does the person deal with stress, anxiety, and arousal, and does it increase the serotonin level? Does it affect the motivation, personality, and the way they express themselves? The emotional intelligence and ability and moderation or management would definitely play a huge role in working or considering aggression in sports. Okay. So those are all of the topics that we talked about here. And like I said before, a lot of what we do in this course is very complex, multidimensional, and relative. So that means that they are all intertwined and they tend to work together. So for the final assessment of this course, there are 10 short answer questions, and you will have about 3 to 5 days to complete them. The assessment is going to become available on May 1st. I know there are some people that wanted it a little bit earlier. If that is you, you can sort of drop me a comment and let me know that that's what you really want. And then, depending on how many people do that, we have about 36 people enrolled in the course. If I get about 50%, I will send it earlier so you guys can get it out today. But it's open book, open browser. So I would suggest that you take a look at all of the units that I just sort of read through for you. So read through those units, they will definitely be huge help. And then also remember that the content, the theory specifically is not as important as your interpretation of it. I'm looking to see how well you're able to interpret the work so that we can use it in practice. Right? I know a lot of these courses, you get a lot of theory, you learn the sciences and you figure that out. But for this course, it's very applied based. And since we don't have the face-to-face usage, so it can give you practicums that can sort of explore how you work with athletes or how you sort of translate some of these skills. And that's why we had so many assessments in this course, because we wanted to really see whether or not we can conceptualize the use of this material. Right. So I hope that you did enjoy this course. I know it was a wild semester, digital and all, and the year was a little bit crazy. So if you do have any questions for me, just shoot me a message and let me know if you have any questions, if there's anything that I can help you with in your adjustment or your way of working, or just in general. I am a human performance specialist. So if you have any questions, feel free to check in with me and we can do a consult. And I can try to help you adjust with whatever it is you're adjusting. Yeah, so if you have any questions, let me know. I will leave my contact information somewhere here, and then you have access see my email and things like that as well. So have a great remainder of your semester. I look forward to reading your responses. Remember, it's 10 short answer questions. You have a few days to do it. Browser open, book open, all about interpretation. So I look forward to hearing the way you conceptualize this stuff. So I look forward to it. Have a good day.